right, thank you for opening the video. I'm Don Ford. This is Progressive Insider. We are here in another, well, I guess it's part 2 in a series of the Bernie delegate interviews. We are here today with Heather Stockwell, delegate number 1 in New Hampshire. She was the largest vote getter in District 2? 1.
Congressional District 2, yeah.
Right. There's only 2 congressional districts in New Hampshire, so easy to mix them up. Heather, thank you for being here with us today.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me on, Don. I'm really excited to be talking with folks all over the country about this whole thing I'm doing here. I guess I'm going to Milwaukee, and I couldn't be happier and more humbled and excited, but also, like there's a lot up in the air that we don't know. So it's also super exciting,
There is a lot going on right now.
Plays out.
As the time of this interview, just about an hour ago, Amy Klobuchar dropped out of the race.
Right. And, I just found out in the middle of a meeting.
Sometimes good news comes when it comes. But, in New Hampshire, before we get into the process, let's talk about, let's not bury the lead, because this is what people are worried about, right? Amy and Pete and Bernie were the only 3 viable candidates in New Hampshire.
That's right. They were the only ones, yeah.
And now Amy and Pete are both out of the race.
Correct. And that means that their delegates are up for grabs, basically. They can vote however, up for grabs is maybe the wrong
I'm going back
terminology, but
I'm going back to unpledged small u.
Sure.
Big unpledged capital U. It's a simple distinction, but it really matters because a big U unpledged delegate was a super delegate that it's fit specific dynamics. The small U unpledged delegate, very similar, slightly different dynamic because they're not automatically to the convention and they can't be leveraged by the media. But it is a new type of super delegate to a degree because they're going to be voting on the first ballot.
Right. They could, that could certainly change everything. It'll be interesting to see. Iowa also has a lot of Pete delegates, and it'll be interesting to see where they go too. My theory is that none of them, it's not a guarantee that they're all going to go to one candidate or another, that it's all very individual. And my goal is to reach out to some of these folks that live in my district, at least, that I know. I know a couple of them. I'm giving them a few days to breathe.
You gotta let the corpse cool. You can't just jump on it too fast. You give them a second to breathe, do the thing.
Exactly. I think some of them may be able to be convinced as we move forward to, come onto the Bernie team. Some of them probably not, but we'll see.
In your district, and you're specifically in Dublin, so you don't have any delegates with any other candidates specifically in your area, but you do have 3 Pete delegates that are in Cannon, Keene, and Columbia, and then Amy has 2 delegates, one in North Sutton and one in Lyndonborough. I am not releasing their names publicly because, like you just said, the state party chairs did, but I want people like you, the delegate.
And it is it is out there in public information. It's been in the newspapers. It's on the NHDP website.
Right.
And so when those folks are close to me, I already do know one of the Pete delegates in my area. So I'm sure we will have conversations coming up about. I believe she supported Bernie last time. So. I think there's a possibility there, but I think if we're shoving it down people's throat right away, we might automatically lose there. So I'm trying to be strategic.
Are you suggesting there's some tact to this? Is that what
people have told me I'm kind of strategic?
Yeah, wow, that's something I don't get to hear a lot. I'm like, yeah, I think that sounds like a great idea. Let's be strategic. And that's really our organizing power at the end of the day, right? Thank goodness in New Hampshire, we have delegates like you, and now we are the only confirmed delegates. So it's pretty much on you guys, no pressure. So,
well, thanks.
Yeah, but this is also why, and a quick plug for this, what's happening. This is why it's so important we do our delegates fundraising. Now, we do the same fundraising we did. She has a fundraiser. Heather has a fundraiser right now that you can be a part of. We will link it and everything we do. Right now, at the time of this, it is let's see, she is at, I have it right here, she's at
$700.
$705. She is, the goal is important to have a larger goal because we still are unsure. Now, the hotel room prices haven't been released yet, right?
No, they haven't. And I hear there's going to be a cap. But I also hear people in Milwaukee are charging an arm and a leg even for like Airbnbs and stuff at this point.
Right, they know what they're doing. Yeah, totally.
I'm sort of thinking, if it could still be $300 a night for a hotel room. But I do, and we are required to stay there. I've had a few offers now for places to stay in or around Milwaukee. But the NHDP has told us that we have to stay in the mandated hotel. So that they can communicate daily with us.
We
also
a good reason for this.
Credentials
yeah, it's credentials. In the morning, they do credentials at breakfast. And trust me, you're not going to want to have to commute to pick up your credentials after the day you've had. You're going to want to wake up and be right there. It's just an extra thing to get in your way, to inhibit you from whatever's happening. And it is much better. I got to give it to Ray, your state party chair. He definitely tries to make it as reasonable and equitable. I mean, a lot of my information comes from him, confirmed by him. As a former ASDC chair, it's a good person to get information from.
Yeah, Ray's been super helpful, and the whole team at the office there has been really helpful. They're sending out almost weekly emails to all the delegates just to communicate whatever they know. But we don't know everything yet. But I agree. I feel like the extra cost in a hotel room will also cut down on transportation costs. So it's all sort of a balance.
There is a rule in the convention thing about equitable housing where they're supposed to provide a deal. And they do it for the DNC meetings where they offer a deal for a little while. In 2016, they did try to lock the Bernie delegates out by making these incredibly high costs. And that was a move that was made against the rules. But we saw a lot of things happen against the rules in 2016. And I'm really hoping that it won't be as bad in 2020, but we still have to prepare for it. We don't know.
Right.
We don't know. We're actually in striking distance right now. And how does that feel, by the way, being a delegate for a confirmed candidate like Bernie Sanders? And we only have 6 of you right now, so there aren't a lot of people.
Right.
Yeah, there's only 6. So
we're like part of the 1% or something.
I think it might be less than 1% actually, like the 0.0001%. Yeah, no. It's got to be a lot of pressure, but at the same time, kind of relieving to know you're going and to be engaged.
Yeah, it is relieving, to be assigned finally and not just elect. I mean, it felt good to be elected too. Don't get me wrong. To have your peers come out to a caucus at 9 o'clock in the morning and maybe travel an hour to get there is an incredible feeling. I will just say, and really humbling that people actually turned out for that. But now it's all a little bit different. Now, I'm definitely going. It feels really, really weird. And I don't know. I don't even know what to say about it. It feels really weird. Yeah. Taking it really seriously. So I feel like it's, I've earned it on some level, but I also have a little bit of imposter syndrome. As much as I've been part of this movement here in New Hampshire, part of me is like, do I deserve to go? I'm just a white lady from New Hampshire,
Let's talk about that. Hang on a second. Let's go back. Because a lot of people are delegates, and a lot of people are saying, well, do I deserve to go? And you made a couple of key points to determine if someone deserves to go. And it really comes down to, can you get people to show up for you and vote in a popularity contest on your behalf? And that's
right.
it. That's it. So you did. You were successful. How did you, at your caucus, now we've talked about this, and we're going to get into this, just full disclaimer, Heather is a professional organizer.
Right.
She is, and we're going to get into that and talk about that in a little bit, what she does and how she does it, because it's important to understand that this is not a normal situation in regards to this, but learning from her experience is how we build more professional organizers. So tell me, what was your trick? What was your tip? What was your thing that got people there?
Well, I mean, part of organizing is just being multi-tactical. Not one thing works for everybody. Texting might work best for some people, whereas Facebook is best for another, and email is best for another. Sometimes
so it's not a one-size-fit-all thing. It's not a one-size-fits-all. It's a little different. It's a fluid idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I had the experience of doing it last time. So I know that was helpful, but I also work for a great progressive organization here that was supportive of any of our members who were running. So, for instance, we put out an email saying, "Hey, go to the caucus, in either district, and support one of these people or all of these people, because you get to vote for 4 people who identify as men and 4 who identify as women." So because I'm an organizer and I've made phone calls to a lot of, Bernie supporters and progressive folks out there in all over the state, really, but mostly in my region, that's, I think, part of what did it.
So you basically were out there, and this is something I tell people on the phone in person, because they're out there campaigning for Bernie and they're out there doing this stuff, but then they have to run for delegate slots, and they go, "Oh, there's like a month. You guys do your delegates in advance, but some do it after." And people go, "Oh, well, there's a month," but people lose interest in that time, and all sorts of things go on. And so that's why it's so important that you are engaging with people with your name and who you are and what you do, so there's a personal connection. That's why precinct captain seats, your job, all these other things that give you a title of some kind makes it more easy to associate who you are and what you do for memory's sake.
Right. And, I've struggled a little bit with some of the conversations around the super delegates and delegates in general, because I do see that the pledged delegates, the role is really different, and we do really represent our communities on lots of different levels. For instance, Sebastian is part of the Latino community here in New Hampshire, which, we're not a super diverse state. So I'm really excited.
I was surprised when I saw a Latino candidate a delegate that wasn't at large in New Hampshire. I was a little surprised.
Yeah. And Sebastian actually said to me, "Heather, you're the one that called me up a few years ago on the phone and got me to get engaged." And now Sebastian's on one of our boards. He's part of the leadership of Rights and Democracy where I work, and now he's a delegate. I couldn't, so I'm really
you're a part of RAD.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I know RAD really well. You guys are pretty rad. Yeah, no, very familiar. I spent some time in the Northeast, working on some campaigns. I had been briefly on a New Hampshire 1 campaign and the fiasco that was the last primary, as well as I'm currently helping with a lieutenant governor's race in Vermont that RAD is a big
with Zuckerman, and Zuckerman's running for governor.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Brenda Siegel.
I love Brenda.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Brenda and her opioid plan. We actually did an interview with her that isn't getting a ton of traction. I'm trying to figure out how to get it out to more people. We're going to cut some promos. But, RAD has been a big influence on her and has been a big position of change. Oh, yeah, no, big time. I've been working with her very closely since she lost her governor's race. And she's only good things. Her opioid plan is amazing. The work she's doing is incredible. And it's been groups like RAD that have enabled her to do these things because you do something so special at Rights and Democracy. So why don't you tell us what you guys do?
Oh, gosh, so much.
Do we have time?
Are we going to run out of time? I don't know. Do we need a new segment for this?
We are safely at that 15-minute mark Carrie asked for, though, so heads up on that.
Rights and Democracy is a grassroots multi-issue organization here in New Hampshire and Vermont. But we also have relationships with national organizations like People's Action and the Center for Popular Democracy. And those 2 organizations work with citizen action groups like ours all over the country. And actually, I'm sure there's some in California that they work with. I think it's like almost 40 states for each of them. Wow. So it represents, over 1 million people, 1.5 million people, I think, at least at this point.
Just so everyone knows, a citizen action group is the idea of if you want to do a voter-led initiative, if you want to do any of these things where you want to drive legislation around, because almost every state, because actually some of these make it very, very hard, but almost every state has some type of petition process to get something on the ballot. And all these groups are basically organized to push these petitions in some way or another. And there's a lot of shady maneuvering, but there's a lot of really great maneuvering too.
Right, and they tend to be, people powered, not, not necessarily grant funded or, corporation-funded organizations. They're real people-powered organizations. Generally, a lot of those over the years have been a single issue. It might be housing, it might be healthcare, it might be voting rights. And so what we decided to do with Rights and Democracy, or James really Haslam, the executive director, he really saw that need for a multi-issue platform because so many of the issues really intersect. You can't really talk about healthcare without getting into, for instance, education or the minimum wage or how that plays out in family economy.
Yeah, everything is so interconnected lately, and this is something we were talking about. We didn't. Sorry to always go back to these interviews, but it's also kind of a plug for our work. But we did an interview with somebody who was dealing with an environmental justice issue, and it was inevitably tied to a racial justice issue, and you couldn't separate them anymore. It was impossible to see them as separate ideas because they were taking environmental issues and putting them into, based on this particular issue. And this is just this is where we changes into this racial. These communities of color are affected disproportionately.
Right, exactly. And in New Hampshire and Vermont, we don't have the hugest amount of diversity. We all became very aware of that again during this primary. Everybody told us how not diverse we were.
We need to put Florida earlier in the primary process. I think it's the only way anyone will be happy.
Right? Yeah, a good southern state. That'll get things going. But I do also feel like, we take it all very seriously here in New Hampshire. I mean, the first 6 months of this year, I spent a lot of time teaching people about bird dogging and how to ask tough questions to candidates in a nonpartisan way, in an issue-based way. We really we're a nonpartisan organization. We focus on issues, and anybody's, if you agree with our political analysis around that issue, then the more the merrier. We want everybody's help. You're welcome to join in.
I feel like this is also really an extension of the long-term effect of Bernie Sanders on the region, because he would always say stick to policy. And there's so many people that are like extensions of the work that he did by becoming mayors of Burlington. I don't know what the connection is to RAD, but I know they have a deep-rooted connection. And so sticking to policy is so important.
Right. I mean, in full disclosure, we endorsed Bernie in 2016, and it's what drew me to 2015, really. It's what drew me to the organization in the first place. But also that there was a plan after the election is another thing that really was attractive, is that we weren't going to let this die. I've heard this before.
This is new to me. So what was the plan after the election?
I guess I started to help make that plan. I said, well, we need to, I raised my hand.
And here we are, you're a delegate. This is how it works.
And then I just went blah, 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 and everybody went, good idea. I said, we need to organize regionally. We've built some power. We endorsed candidates. Some of them got elected, some didn't. Let's organize in our own regions around the issues and keep people engaged around those issues, because in reality, what I see that happened over those 4 years is that we didn't stop talking about, Green New Deal. We didn't stop talking about Medicare for all or minimum wage. We kept pushing those issues and kept, on all of our state legislators as well as our federal ones.
They really thought we were going to go away, didn't they?
I think, I think, and on some level, I think there are still people that think that this is some kind of fad or something. And
kind of like the world ending is temporary.
Yeah, right. We'll just sweep up the ashes. It'll be fine.
The bunkers are for, man. Come on. You're like, no, that's not. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So anyway, I was a little worried. We did a ranked choice vote with our membership on our endorsement process. So that's one of the benefits of being a paying member of Rights and Democracy, is that you get to vote on who we endorse, from local candidates up to president.
Now, can you guys only endorse sometimes? Because this is kind of a silly question, and it might get edited out, but I'm just curious. How do you guys file as an organization? Are you a federal organization or a state? Because you're endorsing state candidates, and you have to be a state. You can't be a PAC for that. So is it a nonprofit?
It is a nonprofit. We are a 501c3 and a 501c4.
How do
and
we
so,
get around the political aspect? Because you're supposed to be non-political with some degree. Is it two separate?
Well,
things?
the C4 is the political entity. But the C4 is also where our membership is, and our membership is who makes those decisions. And we have a board.
Oh,
So we have a
okay.
board for the C3, which is the educational, which is Rights and Democracy Institute, and then Rights and Democracy, just Rights and Democracy. Although we're talking about being an action fund, just so we could be rad AF.
Like, we don't actually need this. We just really, really want the designation. It's like being doctor.
So each part does their own thing.
I support that decision, by the way, for that reason alone. I don't even know what any of it means, but I'm like, that sounds great.
We just want to make the T-shirts. That's
I want to make that T-shirt. So,
but in all seriousness, we did have to do a little bit of legal finagling. I don't know if that's the right word, but in order, once our membership endorsed, and I may not even have all of the facts completely correct here,
Sure. You speak for yourself, not the organization at this moment. That's okay.
Sure. So my understanding is that we also started a PAC. Like we have started PACs before to do certain work. So we put it in a bucket that might be for that's not true.
Anytime you ever want to use a single issue, just so everyone's comfortable, I want to say this just because PAC is a dirty word in the movement, and that's a mistake.
Right.
That's a mistake. PACs are some of the clearest, most transparent forms of election, anything that we have. People are thinking of dark money super PACs that are the problem.
Super PACs are different.
Now, it's different when a PAC is like, let's say it's the macaroni and cheese PAC, and they're an evil corporate macaroni and cheese company, and they're funding money. Then yeah, that's a problem. But we're talking about like PACs on this level. Like if I had a PAC and was spending all my funding, you would know where every dollar was spent under or over $25 or $50, something like that.
Right. Exactly. And the reason that we did it is just so that our staff could actually work part-time to support the campaign, because our membership had voted to endorse. We wanted to do everything in our power possible to help out.
Creating a separate legal entity for money for that purpose to go through, and that way they're legally separate, so that if anything, I get it. No, that makes sense. This is the political maneuvering I think everyone really needs to understand, because like we get in trouble with the corporate money talk because unions are technically corporations. And so we run into a big problem there. And that was with when I helped negotiate a rule at the DNC level where I said, we have to not take money from corporations that lobby against our platform is what I shot for. But we got interest, and that actually was added on the floor because we had to make a distinction that unions were allowed without saying the word unions, because all rules at that level are done in reverse. You talk about what can't happen, not what can.
Yeah, it's been interesting, that whole Michael Bloomberg story that came out a few days ago about, Bernie refusing to take money from Bloomberg. And I was like, well, in the general election, I'd rather lose $2,700 like everyone else, or he could start a PAC and support Bernie with that PAC. I don't know.
Yeah, that's also a big misunderstanding with super PACs. So they go, I'm not going to take super PAC money. Super PACs can't give candidates money, and candidates have no control over whether or not someone opens a super PAC.
Right.
As a matter of fact, Bernie does have super PACs because there are these little organizations like the nurses union that have to open up these organizations just to put money into them and spend money.
Right.
It's the same thing as the Delegate.
And Andrew Yang had Truckers for Yang, which was a completely separate organization, but they bought a Mack truck and put a big Yang picture of Yang on the side of it that said Truckers for Yang, and that thing showed up all over the place during the campaign here in New Hampshire.
I actually knew Trump was going to win in 2016 because of all the Trump mud. And so that was where people had written in mud or scratched out the mud on trucks to write Trump. And I had seen, because I'd driven through 32 states from the convention to the general election doing this thing that is still unreleased. Anyways, but we saw all these signs as it was going, like that it was that, and in Pennsylvania, I already knew we were going to lose Florida because of how poorly the campaign was handled. But in Pennsylvania, they had these giant signs that were hand-painted on barns of Trump. They're like the Trump logo. But someone had been going around being paid to paint, and this was a huge industry where someone was paying a lot of money to paint these signs everywhere.
Right.
It's like, if I didn't know who Trump was, I would think this is America.
Right.
And
right.
so little off subject for us, but still a relevant talking point.
Yeah, well, I mean, it actually sort of made me think about when I first started working for Rights and Democracy. I was hired as a project staff, and we were chosen for this program that People's Action ran, where they were really looking at all the states that had counties that pivoted from Obama twice and then to Trump. And we had 3 of those counties here in New Hampshire.
Yeah,
Most of them occurred in the
These
heartland.
are really important counties, by the way, just so everyone knows. These flip counties are what actually changed the elections, because they both voted for Obama and Trump, and they prefer change. They want to vote for whoever's going to change their life, because they're in rural districts and they're super miserable.
Right, they're rural and all pretty white, working class across the country. We found so that was a big reason. That was the reason we were chosen for this program. And so I set out to coordinate a survey, and I surveyed over 1,000 people in the state, and then got a lot of help with crunching all those numbers and coming out with a report on our findings based on statistics here in New Hampshire, which has really propelled Rights and Democracy in the state towards, what we put out our People's Platform from that information.
So basically, you did a deep canvas of 1,000 people that you specifically targeted because of these flip counties to figure out what they wanted, because these are the people who back things, who get behind things, who support things, but they feel like their voice isn't heard.
Bingo. Exactly. And we found actually overwhelming support, whether you were old or young or identified as a Republican or a Democrat. Money in politics was a huge assessment of who to blame. But a lot of people, even in their own party, also identified, Republicans and Democrats as part of the problem as well, which I also find interesting, data-wise.
So I'm gonna throw something out at you real fast then on that notion, because I love talking about data, by the way. I had no idea.
Cool.
Oh yeah, we're like cut from the same cloth on this level. I don't really like getting into politics, but I don't get into policy, but I love politics. Love politics. Policy, I'm like, let's find an expert. So
I like to read bills now, so.
Nice, thank you. So what it comes down to is basically this idea that we contact likely voters too much. And the Dem Party has gone from only going for the safe bet, and that shrunk our electorate. Right. And that's caused all this damage, which has also allowed a populist movement like what we're seeing right now to take root and be effective in the same way you're talking about, which I think what you just said is so crucial, because this is exactly what we were promoting the whole time. Like, are you sure we didn't know each other?
Well, right. I think also, my experience growing up in New Hampshire, and I know I'm not alone, because I talk to people, all in the field all the time, and my experience growing up, I grew up in a conservative family. My father was a Republican state rep. And it was not popular for me in my household to talk about any of the issues that I was seeing in the world. And so I'm a little frustrated. I get a little frustrated with like the party system, because I personally, like the first Democratic event I ever went to as a young person, people knew me and knew my dad, and they said, "What are you doing here?" As if.
Sorry. My face doesn't get picked up by the camera unless I say something. But oh my God.
Yeah. Awkward.
You're not one of us.
And I was sort of like, well, what do you mean? What am I doing here? I can't come to this. Like, I want to see, this guy's running for governor. Like, I want to hear him speak. And
they're treating you like you're a tracker or something, like you were there to report for your dad or something like that.
Something. And I said, well, but your dad. And they didn't even have to say anything. They just didn't have anything to say after your dad. And I said, just because my dad is a Republican doesn't make me a Republican.
Like the worst your mama joke ever. Your dad? Hello? You're
Hello?
like, No,
Guess what? I have my own brain. I know I'm a woman, but I do have thoughts in here. And yeah,
that sucks,
so
though. That sucks that you had to do that, but good on you for fighting through that, and you did, right?
and that was a long time ago. I mean, and so
I imagine Ray Buckley was still a party chair at that time.
I think he might have been. I don't know. It's not until recently that I really got involved with the party. In last election, I sort of rolled around my bed for a while and moaned a lot and went, oh my God, I have to just suck it up and vote for Hillary. And I did. And I thought about leaving the party and eventually came to this realization that I'd identified as a Democrat for over 30 years, but I never really stepped up and gotten involved. And so I set out to do the exact opposite, to do the Dem enter instead of exit. It's I'm glad I did on some level, but it's also completely frustrating at times.
Yeah, no, I think completely frustrating at times is really a very reasonable thing. And this is something I was thinking about just the other day, because I spend so long convincing people to do exactly what you're doing. It's like, why spend all this? What these videos are for, right? These videos are, we're hoping someone sees this and they're inspired to get, just like that person you called on the phone, but we can't call everyone on the phone. We got to grow the movement faster than that. But there's so much hardship and risks that comes along with this that people have to be prepared for. And it does season you and you get stronger. And there's a joke we have that's like, you spend your first year in politics messing everything up, and then you spend the next 9 years trying to fix it, and then suddenly you've been in politics for a decade. And so so there's really something to say about what you're asking people to do. And even me, I have been torn to shreds by my own progressives in California. My own progressives have gone after the very people who I thought to make sure would be Bernie delegates, just turned on me like, I have no problem with the establishment, all my problems with progressives. So you really don't know what form the problem you're going to face is going to come in. And when we ask people to do this, we need to make sure they have the emotional support to get through this stuff, because that's a form of attrition, that we lose people when they get beaten up. And it's not always the establishment. It's not always the Republicans. Sometimes it's our own people.
Yeah, that is frustrating. But I also think it's a sign that we have a very diverse base. And, that's
a great way to look at it, by the way. That's a great way.
Thanks. I mean, because I've also been really frustrated by the narrative. I think that maybe Mayor Pete was kind of pushing it out that Bernie has an inflexible agenda.
Right.
And my way or the highway, I think it was the phrase. And I really struggle with that, because my whole experience being involved in this movement for the last, 4 years has been a place where people encourage you to talk about your tension. If you don't agree, or if something's really bugging you, to speak out, speak up, say it out loud, and get some feedback from people. And that's not my way or the highway.
No, not at all. I think these secret no's, I call them secret no's, and secret no's are really dangerous. And if you watch things like The Secret, or you understand like energy moves, that if your people who you're trusting to support you are secretly not believing that you can do, or are secretly saying no in their head, it inhibits the whole process. And that's why we're much better off just saying, okay, I'm seeing a problem here. And there's a big difference between taking it to Twitter and saying it on your Facebook. There's a big, big difference. Twitter could go anywhere. Facebook, you're trying to fix a problem. And that's sort of, I think, also a distinction that we would be well to make, because we do need to listen to each other, and we do need to have this open communication.
Right. And I mean, and a lot of what I see on the ground here in New Hampshire, I mean, I just talked to somebody just last week that, her family is all Trump supporters, and she's convinced them to all vote for Bernie this time around. And it's been a lot of painstaking conversations to get there. So that's also been a big thing for me, is like, as much as we need to talk to all of the, not just the delegates, but also those supporters, their candidates are dropping out. Some of those people, if we are careful and listen, I think might come to our side when they are really faced with the choices, which is what it's coming down to here.
Yeah, it's happening right now as we're. I mean, I'm probably gonna get off this interview to somebody else having dropped out. So, so I hope it's Biden. So yeah.
Well,
Well,
Tulsi should probably bow out any day.
I think right now that Tulsi is not. If they don't have delegates, they're not even in the race, in my opinion.
No, and it kind of seems like their campaign is not. It's sort of changed. I don't know. It doesn't. Yeah,
it does seem like it's changed. I'm not 100% sure what Tulsi's full aim here is, but there's been some coordination between her and the Sanders campaign through the Sanders Institute and all that sort of stuff. So
yeah, she's a fellow there. I don't know about coordination, but yeah.
I had proposed a strategy I've talked about this on my live streams. I proposed a strategy 2 years ago to the Bernie campaign before they were running, because they were afraid of Tulsi running because they thought it would detract. And I was like, no, Tulsi's people are there. Tulsi's there to throw the punches and take the hits that Bernie can't, so he stays out of it. So it's kind of important we keep Tulsi in the race, like running around, because we need the media to still want to talk to her to say the things Bernie can't.
Yeah,
I mean, the voting is showing she's not pulling the votes to distract from our popular vote total.
No, and I think at this point, now that we're seeing, I mean, this is the point when some of the more moderate candidates are dropping out to support the strong candidate, and I think that's what the progressive candidates should do. We've seen that with Marianne Williamson. I mean, Yang.
Yeah, I'd like to see something. Something does need attraction there, but I just don't know enough about the inner politics between the two campaigns to make any sort of claim. I just know what I proposed and what happened based on that. I'm very happy with how Tulsi and her people have behaved and performed, with the exception of one particular person I've been very vocal about not enjoying the company of. But other than that, I am, really, really happy and, thank her for her work. And I hope that we already have her supporters as voters. It's already, the numbers are already showing.
Too. I mean, I think we have too much in common to not have them for the most part. But again, we're not going to get every single one of them, and that's okay.
That is okay.
But I do think, she's done in New Hampshire, I've had people visit New Hampshire throughout the primary who said, holy crap, I can't believe that Tulsi's so popular here. What's up with that? And I said, well, she did a lot of work here, and she was the first campaign to have signs. For a while, she was the only campaign to have signs.
Really? Yeah. She's so young, too. I think she's like my age, so she's like really has a big future. I'm like 30. I'm 38. I think she's right around there. Maybe she's a year older or younger, but it was kind of hard for me to take that Pete is significantly younger than me. But it's a hard pill to swallow. I was like, wow, I really have not been doing enough with my life. So
surfing, wow.
So
we surfed here on New Year's Day in the Atlantic, on the coast of New Hampshire.
Well, I don't know if that's the message I'd want to send either. I
don't know if it's very smart.
New Hampshire does get some crazy waves. It's just the water is freezing.
Right.
They don't really curl very well, but they're big. I don't know what's up with that. I always get shocked. Every time I'm in New Hampshire, it's raining. I'm always like, look at the water! Look at the water! But I just, is there anything you want to say to people to make them feel more at ease right now? Like, I've been saying whatever I can, as much as I can, but you're the elected delegate now, and you're the voice of reason here, and we've been on the same page, mostly because I get most of my information from your state party chair, and same thing. What can we tell people right now?
People have actually, I think I took it the wrong way at first, but somebody said, I am envious of Bernie supporters' sort of confidence. Mm-hmm. And I think I took it the wrong way, like we had confidence without reason, kind of. And I was like, no, I have confidence because I have been part of this movement for the last 4 years and been helping build this in my own state and across the country. And I feel like you're sort of negating that by not recognizing that that's a thing that's been happening here. People have been all over this country building this movement.
You're basically saying we've earned that confidence, and you have a hard time. Well, there's that imposter syndrome, though, kicking up steam. Someone saying they're envious, they're reflecting their own opinions. It doesn't mean the way that you feel like, because you have earned it. And I think that people have watched you. I know people have watched me, and they try to take it from me wherever they can, it still doesn't work because you can only take away so much.
Right. So after sort of thinking about that and processing it, I sort of understand more what she's talking about is that, yeah, I do feel really confident in my choice. It took me a while to come to that decision this time. I really tried to remain very open-minded and look at all the candidates. We had them. I got a selfie with over 20
so you weren't just a blind
here,
supporter automatically. You actually came to that decision intelligently going through all the candidates. Because some people like Chris is like Bernie all day. But you're telling me you really took your time with it.
Well, sure, I did. It was part of my job, first of all. Because we work around issues, not necessarily, that's our main thing. We also do this electoral work, but the focus is the issues. And so, yeah, I knew deep in my heart that I still loved Bernie, but I wanted to set a good example. And I also wanted to make sure I was making the right choice for myself. If somebody else was going to offer, something similar and maybe even had some new ideas, I didn't know what we were going to be presented with. I had my doubts. So my goal was really to get people asking the candidates questions around all of the issues that we're facing and the ones that they care about. I mean, for me, it's healthcare. Other people, it's immigration or, pick one.
Well, this confidence thing might actually be a huge asset because they're all so unconfident in their candidates. They've watched us be so confident in ours, and they want that confidence. They want that feeling. And so there might be a lot of power in presenting that as something that they can have too. They can have confidence in their candidate that they know that this is how it's going to be. We just have to draw a picture that they can be confident about because we're still dealing with the how is he going to pay for it conversation, which is just complete and total horseshit. So,
Right.
So, we're doing a whole section. I just did an interview with my second interview with Warren Mosler this morning, and he's the grandfather of MMT. And so we're just talking a great deal about federal economics and how this affects everything. This little bit's probably going to be edited out, but it's so frustrating to hear people say, they're supposed to be on our side. That's great, but how is he going to pay for it? And you're like, are you a freaking Republican? Because that's some conservatism crap. It's oppression. That's just oppression.
Well, and even the Mercatus study is a, conservative think tank. They came out, not necessarily in support of it, but they tried to prove that it was not feasible economically. And
they're like, oops, it is.
Oops, no, sorry, actually, we saved money.
Yeah, somebody was saying there was that thing came out where they said 68,000 lives plus like some $1 trillion. And someone did the math to figure out how many lives per trillion. I'm like, no. We get both those, not this for that. We get both the money and save lives. And people are just like, why aren't we doing that now? And you're like, that's a good question.
Because it's a very good question.
We don't have somebody like Bernie Sanders in charge of our economic policy. And that's why I love Stephanie Kelton, who's involved with his whole process. Because if we get somebody like that in charge of how our money is actually distributed, which I'm still probably not using any of the correct terminology, really starting over. But that position, we have the chance to really help people with a strong policy. And just to close out on this, I'll let you jump in, I promise. I'm not just going to hammer over this, but we do need to wrap this up. Is that this is why Bernie's policies are so important, because it's a negotiation process. He's the king negotiator. So you got to remember, you start as far out as possible, and you try and get everything you can until you actually get something that passes. And that's why you have to put a big giant broom out, sweep it all up, and see what you end up with.
Well, sure, right. I think Bernie knows darn well, as I do, that as much as time as you might spend writing a bill, it's got to go to the floor and it's got to get hashed out amongst all those folks. So some of it has to remain flexible. Of course it does. But we've also gotten some of the best people in the room to talk about it and how to reflect racial equity and economic justice into all of this, and so that all of these groups of people and stakeholders are being represented in that legislation. It's not an easy task. So that's why I think that my way or the highway is just such BS.
Yeah, it's totally BS. But there is one thing you've actually kind of hit on. You hit on something. We're dancing around a talking point that I think is super powerful. I think it's super, super powerful. because we're talking to all these people about why would Bernie be great? Sure, his policies are crazy, but he's putting the best people in the positions to figure it out. And that's the critical factor. We all talk about, wouldn't it be great if we had the experts actually working in the government on the things they're experts on, instead of trying to work from the outside, barking at people on Twitter about what they should do? No,
right.
This is the best way to at least figure out what we should do. And I think a good example of this is the bill for reparations, because it's not actually a bill for, I think it's 40. I can't remember. I can't remember what it is, but it basically the idea is it's not actually a bill for reparations. It's a bill to decide what reparations will be. And so there's no reason not to start that process. And it's the same thing with electing Bernie Sanders. He may not be able to achieve the things he says we're going to achieve. That's possible. I'm not going to fight that that's a possibility. But
by himself? No, he can't do it by himself.
No, of course not. But with all of us and with all this push and all this drive and changing our electoral politics system, then we very well could. And that's sort of
right.
So,
I say that to people all the time. They're like, why do you think, Bernie can't get this stuff passed? And I was like, here's the thing. None of these other candidates have a movement behind them that is running for office and on committees and doing the work that it is going to take. No other candidate has that.
No,
so
no one does.
When people say, well, how is Bernie ever going to accomplish this? Well, it's because he's got all of us. I mean, it sounds so simple, but
no, we're like herding cats. Getting us to do anything is very challenging. So on that note, I am going to have to close this out, Heather. This has been Heather Stockwell.
Pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. It has been Heather Stockwell, New Hampshire delegate. She has a current GoFundMe up. You should definitely make sure she's funded and there to go, because if our delegates are funded, that means Bloomberg can't try to buy them. Well, he'll still try.
He'll still try.
He'll still
he can't
try.
buy me though.
No, yeah, just tell him to write a check to RAD. So
That's right. Yeah, right. Yeah, he could just donate to RAD
and get nothing for it. It'll be great.
Yeah, we'll do some ads for him. We could do some real slick ads for him.
That's what I'm saying. There's opportunity. I've been telling people not to worry about Bloomberg because basically the Democratic establishment is manipulating him to write checks because they're giving him essentially nothing, and no one's he's not even on the ballot. It's not even like a realistic So we gotta go. Heather, you're amazing. Thank you so much. It's been Heather Stockwell.
Don, thanks for having me on. This is so fun, and thanks for just pushing that progressive message out there across the country. It's so important.
Oh, it's really just I wish that you could just literally feed off the enjoyment of watching people improve the quality of their life by just seizing control of things that they normally wouldn't, and it's really, really real. So
that's what we have to do.
That is what we have to do. So Heather, thank you again. This has been Progressive Insider in our series of delegates. That's number 2. We got a lot more to go, at least 2,000 of them. So I'm Don Ford. This has been Progressive Insider. Thank you very much for watching the video, and feel free to jump on our page, like some other stuff, maybe throw us a donation. We are doing a fundraiser. Always doing fundraisers. That's how this journalism thing has to work. All right, guys. Thank you, and we'll see you later.